Hi there, this is Catherine Tyndall and another episode of Financial Advisors Want to Know. Today we're going to be talking about how to master social media with a advisor who has, in my opinion, mastered social media. I know you said that I've seen that you're like #1 on LinkedIn, which is a really impressive thing to achieve within a couple of years. But I've got Mando here, who has just been phenomenal, gets a ton of outreach on social media. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Catherine. I'm excited to chat today.
So you're only a few years into your practice, is that right?
Yeah, 4 years.
Nice. And have you been primarily doing social media for your outreach, or like what has your journey been into getting into doing social media?
So I'll actually go back before I was an advisor because it will tie into this answer and make this make more sense. When I was
Hmm.
in college, I had a sneaker reselling business that I built through Instagram. And with that business, I completely built it, any revenue through Instagram, through Facebook Marketplace. So when I got into financial advice, I had it on the back of my mind that I wanted to use LinkedIn as the way to grow my business. I
Hmm.
started the same way as most people do, where you call friends and family, you get referrals, you're cold calling, you're doing all of those things that they throw at you when you get into financial advice. But eventually that dries up and cold calling gets really old really quick. So
Hmm.
that's when I went back to the social media thing and said, okay, I need to invest time here. I need to invest money into this. I need to understand how to do this because I need a repeatable process to get a new client. And that's what led to LinkedIn. Last year, it was 83% of my business. And this year, it's been over 90%.
Wow, that's amazing. And how long did it take when you decided to make that transition for you to start seeing results from it as a channel? Because I know a lot of people say, like, when you do things like organic, it's a long timeline. What did that look like for you when you started?
It was immediate, and I think it was immediate because I had the right coaches in my corner. So, there's a guy by the name of Justin Welsh. I don't think he
Hmm.
offers one-on-one coaching anymore, but 2 years ago, I took his course. It was a low-ticket course, maybe 150 bucks, and it was all about how to get inbound traffic through social media and how to monetize it. I was
Hmm.
getting leads almost immediately once I implemented the things in that course. Not a ton of them. I mean, not enough to sustain my business solely from that, but I got 7 clients. I was getting 1 per month at the time, in my first 6 months. So I think for anyone starting, you wanna rely on your golden goose, your go-to prospecting method, whatever that is. But it took a little bit, and then by month 7 to month, what would it be, 19? So I guess my next full year, it was 34 clients came in the door, which was about 3 a month, which is pretty much what my target is in terms of growth right now. So it could take time, I should say, but I don't think it needs to.
Nice. And I know that Justin still does courses online, and I've heard a number of people recommend his course, which is still like you said, like 150 bucks or something in a couple
Mhm.
hours. And so that's a really great resource. And so, like, how much time do you spend dealing with social media stuff now that you've got it set up as a channel? Like, does it take you a lot of time to execute it?
It does take time. I don't think everybody needs to put the time that I do into it. The
Hmm.
thing with it is the more you put in, the more results you're gonna get. Of course, if I'm more active, I'm gonna get more eyeballs on me, and I'm gonna get
Hmm.
better at doing it also. I block time into my calendar just like I would for cold calling blocks. When I pivoted and said, "This is gonna be my strategy," I used to cold call for 4 hours a day. So for
Mm.
me, I said, all right, if I'm cold calling 4 hours a day, it was pretty much morning was cold calls, afternoons and evenings were meetings. I just replaced my cold calling time with social media time. Now I don't do 4 hours a day. It's more like 2 hours, maybe 3 hours at absolute most per day.
Hmm.
But that's what I pivoted to. I don't think anyone needs to do that much. 30 minutes to an hour is definitely enough that you can get some traction. But in 2 hours to 3 hours, I found that I was able to get in front of as many people as I wanted and have the activity for myself across the platform.
That's cool. And what kind of tools are you using? Like, are you just using LinkedIn or like Sales Navigator, or like how have you brought in like any kind of automations into how you're doing the prospecting and follow-ups?
Yeah, so it's, I mean, I really don't use a lot of tools. I use something called Shield to track my content, and that is that's literally it. Um, with how I track like who I'm engaging with and stuff, I just use a spreadsheet. I'm old
Mhm.
fashioned, so I have a list of profiles that I want to make sure I'm tuning into their content. I like their content. I also want to make sure I'm in front of their audience, so I'm commenting on those profiles. I keep it in a
Mhm.
spreadsheet and I just update a spreadsheet. I don't use anything fancy. I know a lot of people use 𝗕𝗹𝗺 is one. I actually did use 𝗕𝗹𝗺 in the past, but I just like the old fashioned way of what I just mentioned a little better. And yeah, I mean, it's really just organization with my calendar and then Shield
Mhm.
and spreadsheet.
That's cool. And then do you have anybody else working, like assistants or anybody that's helping you with this, or are you just managing it all on your own?
No, it's me. Like I write all my content and do everything, and I'll use like ChatGPT to help with ideas because sometimes
Mhm.
ideas could be hard. But I
Yeah.
write all my content. I'm never gonna go into ChatGPT and like take a post just from there. But
Yeah.
what I'll do is say like, okay, this is my ideal client. Give me 3 pain points about this client, and then I might go a step further and say, well, how could I talk about this pain point on social media, and what's an example of a story or a way this might materialize in their life. So I'll use ChatGPT for idea generation, but then I'll write the content. And I always
Mhm.
follow a similar framework, which I learned this. I had a coach, Nat Berman, and then Justin
Mhm.
Welsh does talk about this as well, where you want to have a polarizing hook. You want to have like a setup to kind of paint the picture and show that you empathize with the person. And then you want to switch from the empathy to here's how to actually think about solving this problem, and then a call to action to end the post, whether the call to action is just something generic or sometimes
Mhm.
it's like message me.
Yep. And so are you finding like, because I know for a lot of people that you can post this content and maybe some people will interact with it. How have you been finding your way of getting from that stage of things to actually having active leads? Like, have you tuned the content enough that people are just inbound coming to you? Are you DMing people? Like, how do you actually move people kind of down the sales pipeline from the content?
Eight, I'd say 80% of my leads come inbound, and it honestly
Mhm.
might even be higher than that. I think it's
Mhm.
because I've dialed in who I'm talking to very well.
Mm.
Something I see a lot of people make this mistake. They'll make content and they want it to be general because they want to get a lot of views and they want it to go
Mm.
viral.
Yeah.
But what I've kind of done the complete opposite, and I found this sweet spot for a couple of reasons. First things first, with my ideal client in mind, I've dialed in their exact pain points, how it illustrates in their life, and each piece of content is written like I'm talking one on one to them.
Mhm.
Because if you're that client, you read that, you think I'm talking right to you, that's what gets you to reach out. And on top of that, it's almost uncomfortable to write this way, like it feels awkward. But
Yeah.
as the client, you need to feel the discomfort or the emotion that actually makes you take the action. Because if you don't feel that, why are you going to message Mando? Like you're not. You're
Mhm.
just not going to, right? And I tell advisors this, and they're like, well, I'm uncomfortable. Like that's like it makes me cringe a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, why do you think people are going to reach out? Because they're going to cringe a little bit. So
Yeah.
anyways, that's that's the first piece with like how people are reaching out and inbound and whatnot. But additionally, having your profile set up properly, because a lot of people might read your content and not reach out, but they might view your profile. So, do you have ways that they could opt into a newsletter and get into your world a little more intimately? I think that's very important. A lot of people overlook that. I can
Mhm.
improve with my newsletter. I don't think I'm a master at that or even close, honestly. I'm actually working with
Mhm.
a coach right now to help me with that. But having a newsletter, what does your profile call out? Does it go further on their pain points? Is your about section catered to them rather than catered to you? Things like that.
That's great. And what would you say are things that you've learned more recently that have been maybe stumbling blocks or mistakes or things where, oh, I wish I had switched this sooner. I started doing this thing sooner, for people who are interested in kind of growing this way?
This is a problem I don't think a lot of the audience has right now. I had this problem where I'm getting a lot of leads, but some of them will be unqualified. And I think everybody
Mhm.
could take something away from this. You don't just want a lead on your calendar to say I got more leads this week. And that's a tough mindset shift, right? Because like you want prospects, you want
Yeah.
people who are interested in your service, but it
Mhm.
also wastes time. So
Yes.
one thing that I've done very recently is it's much harder to get on my calendar now. I don't just put my calendar link out on LinkedIn. You can't just go on my profile and book a meeting. It's not just there on a post. It's not in my featured section. If you want to book a meeting with me, you have to actually message me. I
Mhm.
get to ask you some questions before I even give you that calendar link. And from there, we'll book a meeting. So I guess the lesson there is I was too accessible before and I probably wasted a little bit of time.
Mm, that's really good feedback. And do you think in terms of where you were when you first started this, outreach approach and, content approach to where you are now? Like you said, you started getting leads pretty quickly. Do you feel like things have really accelerated, or has it been a fairly steady progression? Like, what would somebody expect, if they go and do, say, Justin Welsh's course and, they start following you and seeing what you're doing and kind of mimicking it and tweaking it for their own situation? Like, I know a lot of people get into the mindset of, okay, well, I want to see quick results. What kind of expectation do you think is reasonable for somebody who's decided that they're, for an advisor where they're like, okay, I'm going to try to do this, of, how it's going to work?
If you want to see quick results on social media, you can have them, but you need to know your ideal client and their pain points and how those pain points materialize in their life. You need to know those like the back of your hand. And honestly, you need to know them better than your ideal client even knows them. Because if you could go on and say, like, here's an example, Catherine. Let's say for my ideal client, I'm going to write a post and let's just spitball this right now. And here's the post. You open your email and it's an invoice for college tuition for your son. And all those years of pushing off the planning you should have been doing have finally caught up to you. The only thing you have is a 401k or equity in your house. So now it becomes sell the house, borrow from the house, or take a loan from your 401k. And if you do that, now you're setting yourself off for your future. You don't want to tell your son to take student loans. So I'll stop there, but you can kind of see how I'm speaking in the you form. It's you, you. I'm painting these very real pictures that my clients are dealing with. And if you're someone reading that and you're in that situation, which a lot of my ideal clients are, you're uncomfortable. You're like, oh man, like, how does this, like, this has just happened to me last week. Like, what is this guy talking about? But that's where if you can get that granular and go that deep, you can get leads tomorrow. Literally, anybody. You don't need an audience. I have a lot of followers, and a lot is relative, right? Like 25,000. Like I'm grateful. Every single person, I'm so grateful. But still, when I had 3,000 followers, I was getting the leads because I was able to relate to the person I wanted to speak to.
That's so great. And like you mentioned earlier, that's going to feel kind of awkward as an advisor doing that.
Oh yeah,
being that specific and calling that person out and calling that pain. That's really great. So in the last minute or so we've got here, is there anything else that we didn't hit that you would impart onto another advisor who's looking to grow on LinkedIn or just approach social media in general that you think just isn't out there already in the ecosystem of all the advice that floats around?
When I started, I was held back a little bit because I was worried about what other advisors would think of me. I was worried about not being smart enough because I was a younger advisor. And I was worried about what they would look at my content, think less of, and try to come at me and say, oh no, Mando, you don't know, like, what are you saying here? That doesn't make sense. What I realized was I'm not talking to other advisors. I'm talking to my ideal client. And my ideal client cares about some of these things that might be elementary to other advisors. So I will talk about those. And back to the point of talking to one person, I think this is the big lesson everyone can get. Talk to one person. Back to that. I'm talking to that person I want to book on my calendar, become a client, and be someone I work with for decades. And in talking to that tone, it's never going to speak to an advisor. So don't worry what other advisors say about you.
That is really good. That is excellent feedback. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on this episode. I think there's so many great nuggets for people to take away. Is there anything else that you want to add just as a action items or things that you think, would you like people to follow you on LinkedIn, or, what do you think is a good kind of call to action for you?
Yeah. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I don't really promote this, but I guess this is probably a good place to promote it. I do coaching with advisors. So if you do want to actually improve your social media and get your LinkedIn to the point you can get leads, and you don't want to have to spend time on courses and figuring out books and what actually works, I do coaching and I offer it to advisors, and it's a 3-call coaching program. So if you want to look into that, just reach out to me.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you again for being on the show, and for everybody listening. I hope you got a lot of value out of this, and please comment on, wherever platform that you're finding this with what you got out of it, and ideas or things that you want to share with us, because I'm always interested to know, what financial advisors want to know. So thanks again for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.